All right, here we are. Another PBR Monday. I got a couple of killer guests tonight that I'm going to bring on right away. We're a little bit early, so we'll wait for the room to populate a little bit here before we get going. We are going to do things a little bit backwards tonight. One of our guests tonight really needs to get some sleep. He's been working for a long time. So I want to bring the guests on first. And after those guys are done, probably a little bit somewhere around half past the hour, we're going to talk about some new bonus sections that have opened up for this year's tour. So some more opportunity for you to get points early in the tour. We're going to talk a little bit more about day 8 and day 9. I made a video just about day 8 and day 9, but I want to talk about that a little bit tonight to clarify what's expected, especially from 2 and 3 person teams as we get through there. All right, so it's let's see. I think we're right at the top of the hour here, so I'm going to bring in my 2 guests right now. I'm not going to lie, one of my favorite teams of all time, Team Trustafarian. And I really like these guys for a couple reasons. One is that they have backgrounds that are kind of similar to my own. But the second is they wouldn't put up with any of my shit, which I really liked a lot. They pushed back on an awful lot of stuff, and I was really rooting hard for these guys last year. And they had a great time. They rode a great tour. And then about day 7, some stuff went sideways. So without any further ado, welcome. Thanks both of you guys for joining us tonight. Why don't you take it away and tell us about your tour last year?
I'll jump in. Sure thing. Yeah, man. So like Martin had mentioned, we were first-time tour attempts, both of us. And I was coming from North Carolina and hadn't, we both put in a ton of time at the beginning of the tour, prepping for it, coming up with game plans and, lots of testing while I could out here in the East Coast. Got out to Idaho and we started the tour. Had a few hiccups through the first few days, but we were pretty well prepared. By day 3, 4, 5, we were worn down a little bit and, sleep deprived, as tends to be the what the tour does to you. And had made it through some spots that both of us were totally surprised that we pulled through. Dealt with some mechanicals, a couple of what Martin would call side hill incidents. By day 5, we weren't quite blowing bubbles, but we were getting to that point, and ended up with these really early morning starts, which was something that Stu will probably agree to. We would be trying to wake up by 3:15, put on wet, cold gear from the day before, and just muster the energy to have consistently early starts, which in hindsight, we recognized was the only thing that could salvage a day when things happened that you couldn't have predicted or didn't have any preparation for. And it saved our hide probably every other day. We had something that could have sent us into a tailspin if we didn't have a super early start before the sun came up. So, that kind of paints the picture. And let's see. I don't know if you remember something on day 5 you wanted to start with, Stu. I'll tell the story of day 7, how that happened, but
tell us about some of your side hill incidents.
Well, and I can start with that because I was the first one to go down on the side hill. So after a beautiful night of staying with Kaylin, yeah. And, what a courteous bunch over there. That was one of the, I think, highlights of the tour. We got in, actually, that was one night we got in early, and she fed us such a great meal. I think it was either a taco or burrito dish. And
elk taco that she had got even.
So friendly, just, man, that was awesome. We had a good shower, but woke up super early again, like Dylan said, 3:15, and immediately hit the trail. I think there's a short fire road section, and then you're right on single track. And I don't think I made it but a mile in and dumped the bike off of a side hill. And here comes the rescue kit, the first incident of having to use the rescue kit. And it was actually in a really bad spot to use the rescue kit. There wasn't any good trees around.
That
So I
first
think we
side hill's kind of bare, yeah.
And it was
so
all kitty litter that you were, everything that was growing or any boulders were buried in, like you said, decomposed granite, and the bike, you can't even hardly stand on it without slipping a foot down.
You got to love the Idaho Batholith.
So, I think this is one of the challenges of the tour is like, it's in these moments where you're still exhausted. You're still waking up. It's dark, it's cold. And, just hitting the pause button for a few seconds and kind of just assessing the situation is just vital. And I think Dylan and I, we did that. We were trying to figure out what was the best plan. I know we went back and forth if we even wanted to use the rescue kit. There was a couple options. One of the options was actually dropping further down to the creek and then kind of riding out. We ended up getting out the rescue kit and trying to anchor up to some, I think, sagebrush, right, Dylan, if I recall?
Yeah, they didn't hold for long. We found something a little sturdier eventually, but
then we kind of just side hilled the bike up, and again, you wake up early, and now it's 5:30, and you're just actually getting your day started. After spending an hour and a half, 2 hours, dinking around on that side hill. So that was kind of a wake up call. Like, man, we got to get moving. We have to be efficient here, but not move too quick, because you need to balance, moving quick with not making a mistake. And so I think that was our first moment where we realized, hey, in order to complete this tour, we just got to move at a really efficient speed, but a safe speed, and keep our rubber side down, if you will. And that was a good lesson, I think, early on, that also helped us and ultimately, allowed us to get to the finish line.
Was it at the end of day 4, Stu, that we I don't remember the town we reached, but it was a late night.
To day 4.
Was it Chalice? Where
I think we got into. Oh no, it is Chalice, where we went to the bar and
and begged for a bag of Lay's and some Easy Mac. And I think that Stu saw Team Coleman Stoves in there, who they were a day ahead and had eventually retired in Chalice, and we caught up to them at the bar, closing it down when we just rolled in. That was a long, late night, and it was that was another time where I had, we'd been dragging on since 3:15 till 10 or 11 at night, and by the time you get in, I was having a couple of electrical issues and just had to have the discipline to take care of it, as tired as I was, and stayed up for another hour and a half to mess with bike maintenance before getting a wink of sleep and waking up and doing it again. But it's the only thing that made the next day go a little smoother, and that put us into Salmon the next day, where we had done some work, and Josh had us lined up with a new set of maybe a GT 333. Is that what we called them, or that was the model number? And slapped some new tires on, and did an oil change, which was, great for the bike probably, but gave me a little peace of mind. And then got some better sleep in Salmon, woke up the next day, and day 6 was probably do you remember it specifically, Stu? I think we did pretty well on day 6, had a pretty efficient day.
I think so. But I mean, hold on, before we move on from Josh, what an amazing dude. I mean, I think when I flash back to my memories of the tour, a lot of it was the people that helped us out. I mean, going back to the people at the bar, their kitchen was completely closed down, and they saw me coming in scraggly, wet, and I said, "Hey, is there any place that's open?" They're like, "No place is open." It's like, "Is there anything you can do to cook us something?" She's like, "You know what? I think I got some macaroni and cheese back there and a PB&J." And and just whipped it up for us and charged us like $20, And then going back to Josh, I think, even though we got in fairly early, I think it was certainly past their closing time, or his closing time, I should say. And he waited around, set us up with new tires, just a heck of a guy. And, I don't want to lose sight there that there was a lot of people that helped us out, and they were, really incredible. But going back to day 6, I think that was one of our better days. That's when we dropped in at North Fork.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yep.
Again, incredible people. The one thing I take away is I think we got in late, Dylan, and we were concerned we didn't get food. And I forget the guy that the new owners. It's a husband and wife, young couple. And he made this spectacular burrito, and we were just like so grateful for the burrito. And then 10 minutes later, here he comes out with some like huckleberry ice cream and just highlight it. But that was a really cool day, Dylan, because that's when we got to do the single track, I think, right? We dropped the gear and do some more single track.
We started that morning and made a quick run down maybe Panther Creek, which I thought was a really smart move. We got an early start, and there were no kamikaze cars coming 100 miles an hour the opposite direction, and we could make really good time. And got to North Fork, dropped bags, took like a really Spartan kit with us, and then rode some of the most, spectacular hills. We were both just couldn't stop smiling, high-fiving each other the whole way. And had a really, really great day. Day 5 or day 6, a couple hiccups here and there, and had end of the day that was challenging and tough, like every day was, and emotionally had taken a toll on me and Stu both probably. And we were both getting worn down and noticed it near the very end of that day, and had a talk with each other and decided that we were both in it and both maybe thinking a little unclear, and pushed on with like kind of a new mental outlook on the tour, and managed to kind of take a big breath and recognize that how tough it was on us and how challenging the tour was, what we had just bitten off, and that we had another 5 days to go. And
I think it's an important point though, Dylan. Like, one of the things I would guess I wasn't prepared for was balancing both individuals in this partnership, so to speak. I mean, Dylan and I are both very stubborn individuals at times, and both
I would have never guessed that.
And so we had a moment there where, one of us, I don't know what ultimately led to it, and it may have been a combination of things that led, but I think that's one of the things, the takeaways, whether you're in certainly a group of 3 or a group of 2, it's like, balancing that. And Dylan and I had a plan that each day one of us would kind of take the lead for that day, and depending on how things shook out, that may not have gone to plan. But I think that's, Dylan, I look back at that time too, and I'm actually really glad it happened that way, because I think from that moment we were like, all right, we're finishing this thing, and it solidified our partnership, which was cool.
Yeah, it did. And kind of maybe take a step back and reevaluate how I was viewing things and analyzing situations, and how the decisions were a partnership and both people had to have buy-in in it. But man, that was the first time I really recognized how much, mental, physical, emotional fatigue that you have 5 or 6 days into something like that. And we were holding up real well. Pulled the day together, finished up, and we were feeling like kings on fresh tires, which was pretty fun. And showed up back to North Fork with a panini press and fresh, burritos ready to go with, and a huckleberry scoop of ice cream. And
I mean, Martin, that was that couple there. I think you were just there, weren't you, with your family?
Yeah. I was. I go up there all the time. They're good friends of ours, and they have a beautiful little baby boy now too.
I mean, just great outfit. It was clean, just super friendly. That store was great. And actually what was cool is Dylan and I were just there the month before. We floated the middle fork of the salmon. So we were actually, just in that area for a week. But anyway, that couple was great. But I think
they run a classy business there, which is incredibly hard to do because you walk into that place and it's a Patagonia store and they got all this stuff. And the assumption most people would make is, well, they got to have some money to have a place like this. The buildings look nice. Those businesses are this close to oblivion all the time. They need every customer that comes in there. They have a hard time getting good help. It's tough running a business like that. And for them to go out of their way, like, to fix you guys a burrito late, that is a testament to how much they respect what you do. I guarantee you the average person that comes rolling up there after fishing on the river for a day at 11 o'clock at night doesn't get a burrito and huckleberry ice cream.
Yeah, but, again, the people that are what make this. And, yeah, it was awesome. That was a really good night. But anyway, I think going into day 7, we were feeling good. We had this moment. We came back, had gas in the tanks. We had both in our physical tank and our, food in the belly. But we got a bunch of rain that night. You recall, Dylan? I mean, it stormed all night. And
yep.
Little did we know day 7 would, we started again early. And I think it was like, was that Panther Creek was the day before, but you immediately get into, I just remember this, you go down this fire road, which was tough to see. And then you start hitting, which Martin, I swear, I think your motive for this tour is to burn in old trails so that you can use later on, because what we rode that morning was just no trail, brush bent over from the rain.
Yeah.
Couldn't see because it was dark, and there's a stream crossing, and we were just picking our way, and we had
Henderson
dry
Ridge,
clothes.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, we hadn't made it to the ridge yet.
But that's called the Henderson Ridge Trail. You have to ride down the creek for a way. Yeah. You should have seen that 3 weeks before you got there when we sawed that out. That trail hadn't been sawed out in forever, and you could log hop it and stuff. But we were in there about 3 weeks before you guys sawing all that stuff out.
Wow.
And I actually ran into a bear back there coming through that brush on the side of the creek. I hit a bear in there one day on my motorcycle.
Oh,
I
my.
believe it. But I mean, I just remember like the brush with all the weight of the water was, and so whoever was leading and we would take turns. I mean, by the time we got out of that first couple miles, we were soaked.
Yeah. And we had spent all night trying to dry our boots out. And it took about 15 minutes in the morning to be drenched again.
I remember we got through that, Dylan, and we were feeling good again. We're like, it opens up. I remember really bony, whether it was a double track or even maybe a fire road, but really jarring. And we kind of get to it wasn't really the summit there, but close to. And that's when you said, hey, I got a problem back here with the bearings. And
we had, gotten through all that brush, gone across a handful of these side hills over scree fields that kept, trying to knock your front tire any direction but the direction you wanted to go. And, finally pulled ourselves through that. A couple of trail finding spots that were a little tricky with all that water from the night before kicking brush over. Got onto what I guess might be you called it Harrison Ridge.
And Henderson.
And Henderson maybe. Okay. And
Henderson Ridge.
And the trail opened up, and it was an old burn area, freshly sawn. Thank you, Martin. And times were good. We were riding, making good headway, feeling all right. And it was about that time, 2 days before I don't know if I had that happen right at this time or this is the cause of it, but I suspect that I had looped my bike out and bent my rear sprocket. Stu and I had to pound my rear sprocket back into plane, and that may have caused what we found out on Henderson Ridge was a catastrophic rear hub bearing failure. And I stopped, and my first thing I checked was my chain tension, and my chain was almost about to fall off my sprocket, and I looked, and it's because my bearing was gone. And we leaned the bike on its side and scratched our heads for a second. And it didn't take but about, I don't know, 2 minutes of conversation before we said, let's get to work. And I happened to, we brought more spare parts than most would suggest, undoubtedly.
Well, you remember Dylan, in Arco, we decided to ship some stuff home because heeding Martin's advice, we were like, we overpacked for this.
Yeah.
And we divvied out the stuff, and I think this is where it gets important. And we had a thing of bearings that fit both of our bikes. And at first it was in the pile to be shipped out. And I think one of us pulled it back for some reason. And ultimately take it off from there. But that's an important point. It was at Arco.
It was on the cut list, and we decided last minute to hold on to a few extra things, and bearings were something that, if you think about a trail swap of a bearing on, in the middle of the woods, you don't, even consider it. But in the pinch, we had to pull it together, and we managed to drive out the old bearing outer race and pound in a new one with some 520 chain, grease and a rock that had, a nice flat on it. And we put a couple of 3/8 socket extensions together to pound it in. And we used, we scrapped together the right parts. And
I think it was 45 minutes.
Yeah, it took like how long?
I think it was 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty quick and efficient. And we slapped the tire back on, stood it up, and it spun great. And what would have been a trip ender and a real pickle to figure out how to get the damn bike out of there, we ended up just riding again. And it was right about sunrise. We had started drying out. We were feeling good again. And what was about to be the lowest point of the trip turned out to be a high, and we were riding the rest of Henderson Ridge and just kept pushing through it and felt like nothing was going to stop us. The riding was so good. We were making up time from a couple of things that were holding us back on our timeline that morning. And we got to some blowdown, pushed through that. And we rode some of the, most epic single track that morning. And I'll keep this rolling because the next part is what dropped me out of the tour. And one of the things, the physical challenges that I had during the trip was my hands had gone numb from vibration. And by day 2, the problem was quickly aggravated, and I would lose feeling in my hands from vibrations. In that I was riding the KTM 500, but I had flex bars, and couldn't manage to keep my hands with feeling in them for long while I was on the single track where I was using the clutch a lot. And while we're out there in the middle of those blowdown areas, it's something that when I talk to people, they don't recognize how challenging the riding is. It's not just a 2-dimensional, trail that you're following. You've got, tree limbs and all these, beetle kill pines that it's like pickup sticks laid through the airspace, and you're dodging them from hitting your shoulders and hitting the side of your bike and clipping your pegs. And it's a lot to pay attention to.
Especially when you're tired, fatigued.
7 days in with, an average of 2 and 3 hour nights of sleep, and your hands, you can't feel your hands, all the problems that everybody's dealing with. And we had just made it to a fire road right before a lookout. What was that lookout? Maybe
Blue Nose.
Yeah. And we were over the hump. We had this huge stretch of, wide fire roads to go for in asphalt for the next few hours. And we were going to make up our time, and, we thought we got through it all. And we made Blue Nose, took like one last epic photograph, and then started taking off. And Stu was in front, and there was a downed pine that was pointing straight up from the downhill side of the road. The road was sloping down, had a grade cut into it, and then sloped down again. And the pine came pointing at me like a joust, and somebody had just lopped off the top 18 inches of it and had a, spike about that size square pointed straight at me. And I had 20 foot of road to ride in, but riding close to the edges of the corners and confident, I dropped my hand and hit my finger on the front of that tree, and it snapped my bars to the side, and I stayed upright and just looked at my hand, and my finger was, pointing in the wrong direction. And I couldn't feel a thing, though. My hands had been numb for a few hours already at that point. And I knew that I needed to stop Stu before he got out of radio distance. I managed to catch up and stopped him. We pulled over, and I thought I was going to keep riding. We tried to tape it up with make a splint out of electrical tape, and it started swelling up within the first 15 minutes. And as soon as I started trying to pull the clutch in, it was obvious to me that I could have attempted to keep going, but it was a simple thing as a busted finger, and it would have stopped Stu's chance at making it for the next 3 days that he had ahead of him. And
I think what's important there, though, Dylan, we did stop and assess. And remember, we passed those they were riding, I think, like gravel bikes. And they'd also said, hey, there's a medical clinic. I forget the town, in the opposite direction. Was it Hamilton? Yeah, you
think so.
Know. And I think that weighed in.
Darby.
And so that weighed into the decision a little bit, right? If there was an opportunity to call it, this may be the best opportunity to get you.
Yeah, we were at a spot that we had asphalt, and I could take it to an ER or a doctor, and Stu would have gone the other direction. And we had already had our discussions prior to that point about what we thought our protocol would be if one person was going to drop out, and it was pretty quick. We had to make the call. I told Stu, I want you to keep going. Are you comfortable going on solo? And I think you had already made it up in your head that you were going to keep going. There was a lot of unknowns going solo, and I was, not sure which direction it would go, but because we were late in that day already, and we had wasted a lot of time on a few problems, and it didn't take you long. You said, call my mom when you get to the hospital and let her know I'm going to be just fine, but don't tell her too much. And
Martin,
don't tell her too much.
What you don't know about my mother is she's quite the worrier, and I kind of kept her out of the loop of this whole thing for quite a while. It wasn't until right before I kind of gave her my Garmin link, and I was afraid she'd actually get a hold of you. And I know you got
That's
that
happened
big,
many times.
and I know you got that big German Shepherd out there, but man, my mother, all 5'6" of her, she can be quite the fight. So I was like, it's kind of this thing, you're balancing all these things in your head. And in that moment in time, like I was worried about Dylan. I was a little bit concerned about going forward, but I was really just worried about like my mother and my family, like in balancing, like how I'm going to explain to them that I am going to, take this on solo. But I think Dylan, what he did.
Excuse me just a minute. That is an emotion that is common to many, many, many adventures too. Climbers feel that way. People that do a lot of sailing feel that way. Everybody feels that way. And there's no simple problem that, how do you balance this? If I go out here, my calculus was always any idiot can get killed in the backcountry. That takes no skill. The skill is in being able to get back to give the slideshow, right? And if you go back there and do something silly to get yourself killed, I mean, you're dead. You don't care about it anymore. But what about all those people you left behind? You really left a hole in their lives. That is an important conversation that everybody should have, and good on you for having it with yourself.
Because, the difference is, Martin, there, we have these PLBs, but if you wreck solo, you go unconscious, what have you, you're not pushing the button, if you have a partner, And, there's others that have completed this thing solo. I'm sure they understand. It weighs on you a bit that, when you have at least another person or two other people, it can be a catastrophic event and you still make it out because someone else is there to push the button, so to speak.
We had a guy, we had a PLB that didn't move for 20 hours once, and we scrambled the entire cavalry to go back in. It turned out the guy instead of having it on himself, he had it like on his handlebars and it just fell off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, I think it's also worth noting, and I think, you said it, Martin, before, in that moment too, it's like we stopped. We said, all right, what's the plan here? All right, Dylan, you got a plan to get medical treatment. But then it's also like, all right, I need to take the gear that's on you that, we had divvied up and, think about what I want to carry forward while also not weighing down myself too much. So there was gear I even gave to Dylan, just take back and been like, I don't need this extra pair of shoes or whatever it was. And, I'll make do. So we did that. And I think that's an important exercise for anyone. I know Jim Spooner, he probably did it. I think, Dylan, you were responsible for carrying the rescue kit and I had other pieces, but hey, I need that. And, that was an important piece. And to take that moment in time and just, hey, don't just wave you off. Like, let's think about how we want to move forward here.
We came up with a plan for communication, at what points we would check in and how you would help me because you had communication to Martin through your Garmin and I didn't. And, we took care of really quickly the items that we needed to address while we had that opportunity and put a plan in action and covered our bases and then took off. And,
well, so Dylan, I think it's worth mentioning here too, again, going back to people, like I forget the gentleman's name, but it wasn't within like 10 minutes of us announcing to you, Martin, that Dylan had to withdraw, that I got this message from this complete stranger.
David Hopewell.
And he's like, hey, I'm in the area. I'll come fetch Dylan. I'll handle him. Just you do your business. And what a weight off the shoulder to like just not have to really worry about Dylan. I mean, he's like, I got a trailer. I'll go find him. I'll take care of him. I have a place to stay. He can come. And I mean, I think that was probably one of the greatest nights of sleep you've ever had, Dylan, from what I recall in talking with you. So.
Oh man. Yeah. I'll say something about that, to bring up conversation about the people in the community behind Tour of Idaho. David Hopewell was, he's a fan and more than a fan. He plans to ride it with a group here, hopefully soon. He's talked to me about it a bit, and we talked about it a bunch while I was staying with him. So he was vacationing in Hamilton, happened to be following Tour through the Facebook page and had been paying attention for a while. And he was quick on the update. Martin knew what had happened through Stu's communication, put out a broadcast. Within an hour, I was, David Hopewell was calling me and letting me know that he'd take care of any trouble that I had and make sure that I was taken care of, comfortable, a spot to sleep when I was in the middle of nowhere. As far as I was concerned, I had nothing but a dirt bike and I was a smelly vagrant that would have had trouble getting anything, taken care of for myself with a bum hand. And he took me in. I met his wife, Vicky, and his kid, Penny, and they gave me a bed and a shower. And I was, so completely grateful for like 3 days of rest with him. And I slept for like 24 hours straight. And
but I mean, like, awesome. Me even crossing the finish line, like, it's partly on him. Because he, like I said, he lifted that weight. Like I was concerned for Dylan. Like, how is he gonna? I mean, our truck was all the way back in, Pocatello, and how is he gonna get home? And like, I mean, Dylan's got family, and they expect us to be together and partners in this endeavor. So, like, David, thanks, man, because me crossing the finish line had a lot to do with you helping us out in that situation. So,
we've never had a rider stranded anywhere. Every time something like that happens. It doesn't matter where it is. A few years ago, when Jeff Jensen had his side hill incident, we had guys from the closest guy was 400 miles away, loading up his truck to go in and help Jeff if he couldn't get his bike back up that side hill. Hillbillies had somebody come in from about 130 miles away. It is amazing, even to me, and I kind of see the whole picture. whenever anybody is stuck out there, the cavalry is on their way.
Really
Yeah.
cool. This really neat thing that's, has nothing to do with finishing other than it's just cool. Again, the people here and who all is interested, but maybe not even interested, but are just willing to help. And that was really neat to see.
I didn't understand it. Martin had talked about the community before then, but it hit home when David, showed up out of nowhere and, put so much effort into taking care of us. So yeah, it meant a lot. And, I'll be rooting for him when he goes on his trip coming up here soon. Fingers crossed he gets one together here with his group of friends.
I tell you what engenders those strong feelings too. There's no bullshit on this. People are tracking you the whole way. They're watching what you do. You don't get to just ride past a bunch of trails and say, "Oh yeah, I did all that stuff." It's kind of like climbing in Yosemite where people can watch you. They're looking at you from binoculars, see the valley floor. They know if you grab that sling or not. So what you guys do, the fact that you allow people to watch your progress, the fact that many of these people have ridden some of these trails, and I rode that trail once last summer, and I rode it all by myself, and it took me all day. You did that as part of a 200-mile day. So these people are sophisticated enough to understand completely what you guys have done, and that engenders this tremendous amount of respect. Even people that don't ride motorcycles, there's people that ride horses on that stuff, and they go, "I can't believe what you guys do." So that is the thing that, my goal was always to build a community with this. That was as important to me as anything else, to help out these businesses along the way. But I never imagined the degree to which people would latch onto this idea, and people that will never do the tour of Idaho. There's a guy that's rescued 2 of our riders that will never do the tour of Idaho, but he watches every year, and he thinks that what you guys do is so cool that all I have to do is call him, and he's in his truck in 15 minutes at 3 in the morning going back to catch somebody.
That's neat. But I think I can't. And sorry, this is when it starts just becoming a complete blur. At this point, my only focus is turning the throttle and keeping my eyes open. I think it was that night, Martin, where there's that last fire road that's closed. I forget what that's called. And again, it'd been a long day. A lot had happened, and you told us it was closed right before we started, or we got the update that it was closed. And I just put it in my head that, hey, note this. Didn't change any of our GPS or any of our waypoints, or didn't even. I think I maybe made a note on the map, but I made the mistake, and I get to the dang gate, and I thought I was in the home stretch, and I was like, man, I'm ready to get home, lay down, and I see the gate closed, and then it dawned on me like, oh, I just made a big mistake. And I think it was like 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m. It was definitely after dark. And talk about loneliness. Like those fire roads, those last bit, I mean, you don't see anyone, anything. It's dark in northern Idaho, and you're just going 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, and it feels like 200 miles you're on those fire roads. But yeah, I hit that gate, and it was like really upset with myself. And I was honestly just thinking, I'm just going to blow through this. If Martin DQs me, so be it. Like, I'm just exhausted. And then it just like, I was like sitting here, there's just like a voice, and I don't know if it was you, Martin, just being like, I just can't like let him down. I can't let Dylan down. I'm like, scramble. So I scramble back. I think you have to go like 30 more miles backtrack to go 20 more miles to hit the highway. And didn't even get in. I forget the that motel, or I shouldn't say motel, the lodge there. Down by
Loxville?
the river. I don't think it was Loxville. It was
It was the Three Rivers of the Wilderness Inn
the Wilderness
that night. Yeah.
And I get in there at 11:30, and at this point I'm just like, I'm done. Like it's over. Jump in the shower and just go to sleep. And this is a reoccurring thing that will happen to me the next like 3 or 4 weeks. It didn't even take an alarm. I was up at 3 a.m. automatically, like PTSD almost, just like, waking up. And it's like, now what do? I just jump on the bike, And again, I think that's just the key here is just keep going. I mean, within reason, but, this thing is doable. It takes, I think, more mental strength than it does actually physical strength. And it was at that,
I agree completely.
like I'm not that great of a dirt bike rider. I think Dylan could attest to that firsthand. I have some strengths here, but it's not dirt bike riding. It's not motorcycle riding. It's there's just in those moments, can you like tell yourself just keep pushing forward? And I think there's some experience gained just being in the woods. And I think Dylan and I, we have a lot of fun adventures, and it's always us two that are always pushing the limit. And I think it's in that moment where it's just like, you know what, you're gonna at least ride another few hours, and those 2 hours turn to 4 hours, and then 6 hours. And I think that was the day, Martin. So was that day 8? And then you and I agreed I would do the 2-man still.
Yeah. Well, what had happened is you'd missed a big section the day before. The fire came up, and we were having trouble communicating through the beacon. And you actually skipped a big section that you could have ridden. And I said, look, there's still a way to put this together. If you'll just ride the 2-man for part of this, you can make that up. Unfortunately, that meant that you had to do Ant Hill. And I was telling these guys before we came on, there are exactly 5 people I know about who have ridden Ant Hill solo, and 2 of them are talking to each other right now. That is the most miserable, what is it, quarter of a mile, half a mile through those first few switchbacks?
Yeah, not much more than that.
And it's, when Jim was up there, every once in a while he'd stop and he'd talk to me through his PLB. And as nice of a guy as he is, he would go, well, this is just completely lovely. I knew exactly what he was talking about. That section sucks. And I ain't going to lie, last time I was there, I said, screw this. I got out my rescue kit and just winched the bike up.
I mean, it was a muddy mess. It was so humid in there too. At one point, so I'd already used the rescue kit once. And so I'm on like the second or third switchback, and I went for it, and I looped the bike, dropped it to the next switchback down essentially. And I was just like deflated. And again, it was just like, you know what? I mean, you got to get out of here. So whipped it out. And I honestly think at that point, like I would just ripped off all my clothes, like with the exception of my pants, just because I needed to cool down. It was just so freaking hot. So can you imagine like if there was an odd hiker or something that was, and here's a dirt bike on the ground? I don't think
there's much of a danger of that back there.
But anyway, got through that, which was, quite the challenge. And is that when you end up in Elk City? Is that ultimately?
You end up at Laksha Lodge that night.
Is that after going through Elk City?
That's after Ant Hill. Then you went up, and from there, I might have allowed you to take like the shortcut into Laksha. I forget exactly what happened. I think you had to do Ant Hill, and I don't know if you went across Windy Ridge and Windy Bill or if you went down Martin Creek.
I went down across Windy.
Yeah. Okay, so you did. That's right. You had to follow the full 2-man thing for that navigation error the day before. By the way, I want to tell everybody that's listening right now, I knew how stressed he was, and I was pulling for these guys. I pull for everybody, but I was especially pulling for these guys. Did I cut you any slack when you made that nav error?
No, you definitely didn't. But I think you intentionally did it too, because I think you saw maybe a little bit of us in you, and
I did.
I think you didn't want to make it any easier for us. Which, looking back,
not only that, but I don't play favorites. You have to do so much stuff. If you make this mistake, you got to pay like everybody else. And as much as I was pulling for you guys, because I had this conversation with a rider today who didn't think they should have to do something to make up for something that they missed yesterday. And that Ho group, I get accused of this all the time. Well, Martin plays favorites. He likes these guys. He doesn't like these guys. As much as I was pulling for you guys, I made you ride the 2-man route. You had to go up Ant Hill. You had to go all the way out across Windy Ridge and Windy Bill. And I was pretty sure you could pull it off. I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew that you were one of these kind of guys that would stop only when you fell asleep in the middle of the trail.
Which that may have. Well, so now, again, things may be blurry, but Elk City's where you have to go get gas, right?
Right.
In order to finish. And
right.
I remember getting to Elk City. I got a sandwich there, leaving Elk City, thinking I was on the home stretch. And I think Team Armadillo, well, I don't know if it was them. No, it was the guys that put together all those great videos.
Was it? It's the Knights. What was that team? Yeah.
So they mentioned
I forget what their team name was.
There's a field, and I don't.
The Fire Swamp.
I can't. This was actually harder than Ant Hill. I don't think we've ever discussed this, Martin. There's this field. It looks totally doable, no big deal, but it is just one giant swamp with all these hidden logs in it. I mean, I think I spent probably 2 hours going a quarter mile. I mean, I dumped my bike probably 4 or 5 times. That was the lowest point of the tour. I'll be quite honest. Like you felt like you were in the home stretch. I hit this field. I don't know what it's called. I know that Knights hit it because they mentioned it too. And I was, just reflecting on it, being like, that was the most terrible experience I've ever had on a dirt bike by far. And
in my own defense, what did I tell you guys about that last year? I said, do not do that. Ride back out the same way you went in. But what happens, and I took it off this year just so that nobody would do that. But what happens is, Michael Knight talked about this when he was on here a few weeks ago. You're so tired at that point that even though you've thought through that stuff, I've done that. I've fallen asleep on a dirt bike before. I've fallen asleep climbing before, wedged behind a flake. When I did Half Dome once, we did a really early, really fast ascent of Half Dome back in the late 70s. And I remember getting up, and I was so tired. It was about 9 o'clock at night. I fell asleep lodged behind a flake. And when you are in those places where you are blowing bubbles, which is what we call it in our community, your ability to make good decisions just flies out the window. Everything that you carefully planned for, at some point, you just mentally can't pull it off anymore. You forget, and you see a route on your GPS, and you forget that you told yourself for 2 months, don't do that.
Right. So that was, that was just god awful. I mean, and then
I think you called it the Field of Nightmares.
Field of Nightmares. Yeah, and that's exactly what it is.
That's what I remembered.
If any of you ever find yourself in that, the second you feel your front tire sink, stop, turn around, and go do something else. You do not want to find yourself in there. But I think after that, more or less, like it was really straightforward. I know I got to Donna's, and I actually got in fairly early. She was great, super friendly, and had a great accommodations for me. And man, just kind of felt like, this is probably going to happen as long as I don't do something really stupid. And then I remember, I think it was day 10. That was definitely the coldest, and that's when having some of the extra gear we did pack came in. I think it was definitely below freezing, and those fire roads cruising at 30, 40. I would hesitate to say 50, 60, but depending on how the GPS shows. But
I only fuss at you if you do that through residential neighborhoods.
Fair enough. But I think it goes back to the tour, and I know I think I saw a picture of a guy yesterday where there was some snow, and we were sitting there in the desert at what, Dylan, 98 plus, our gas boiling, to now like shivering and having to stop every 3 miles, 4 miles, and just like gather yourself to stop from shivering. So it's just this whole thing with the tour. There's so many things that are thrown at you, and it's kind of what makes it so neat is you just got to get through it and keep pushing. And
well, you certainly did that. And one thing I got to say, I was super stoked when you made it last year. Only one of you guys got a jersey number, but as far as I'm concerned, you both finished, because if it had not been for Dylan, do you think you would have made it if you hadn't ridden all the way up to day 6 or day 7 with him?
No, definitely not. And I think that attests to Jim Spooner doing what he just did. I thought that was pretty crazy. But I mean, Martin, I know for a fact, like, it wouldn't, to be honest, and I know there's guys that have done this solo, but it wouldn't have been nearly as fun to, like, Dylan and I had a blast. And that's what, like, to be honest, like, it was cool finishing, Martin. It really was. But I look back and on some of the things, and it was like the time Dylan and I had day 6 ripping that single track, just like high-fiving each other, like so fun. The people that we saw, that helped us. Those were the times, like, as great it is to finish it, whatever, it's more about the journey for sure, and getting yourself through it. So,
and I'm sorry, go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah. One of the things that I think about when I reflect on it is how, all the whole spectrum of emotions were experienced on that tour. I mean, when you hit the marks and everything was going smooth, the trails were incredible, the best you've ridden, and you're making great time and you're hitting all the waypoints. You can't reach the level of excitement that you had without having been just as exhausted and drained and down about the bad luck that just happened 3 or 4 hours before. It put everything in perspective, and you had a range of emotions, all the different events, and it was fun to have that and share it with your great friends and the people that were out there, and then to turn around and you've got those stories that you're thinking back on for me the last year. It comes up in conversation all the time.
Well, you guys said some things. We're getting close to the end of it here, but you said some things that I think are incredibly important that everybody says it comes on here. You talk about discipline. You talk about early starts. You talk about shaking off the small stuff and the importance of just going until you cannot go anymore. That's when you give up, and that's what it takes. The one thing that you didn't say explicitly, but you sure said it in so many words, is that the Tour of Idaho is more of a tour through you than it is a physical location. At some point, you're going to want to quit. And what determines people that make it to Sundance from people that don't? Luck is certainly a large component of it. But in those moments when you're in the fire swamp and you're going, screw this, man, if you can convince yourself to just keep going, then you can finish. But if you're one of these kind of people that gets into something like that, the bar's kind of low for what it's going to take to dissuade you, you're never going to make it. You're just not going to make it under those circumstances. So you got to dig really deep. And I was trying to explain that to a rider today. Sawing logs is something that everybody does, right? And some people saw more than others, and there's no way to make that fair, but you're going to have to get out your saw and saw. And sawing sucks when you're trying to make 200 miles that day, but that's part of it. You guys had to use your rescue kits to winch your bike back up on the trail. Was that pleasant?
Oh God, no.
And it didn't advance you an inch, right? You spent an hour wearing yourself out getting a bike back up onto a trail.
Yeah.
Those are all components of this. And that's what makes this special, because there's a clock on you. So if you go out on a BDR or something like that and you do something, you have a flat, or you do something silly, you get lost or something like that, so what? Pitch your tent and get at it the next day. On this, there's kind of a clock going, right? And so you've got to figure out a way to deal with this stuff and get through it. And the other thing you guys talked about is your thought process is incredibly important. Can you slow things down? Can you take that deep breath and say, this is how I'm going to deal with it? I'm the worst motorcycle rider I know. And the only reason that I can do this stuff is because I'm really good at that. I understand how, wait a minute, let's not freak out here. Let's just take a deep breath and let's figure out a way to deal with this. And Ralph and a lot of the old guys like me that have done it, that's the only reason we can get through this, because we've had years of experience with exactly that. This is how you're going to deal with this situation, and freaking out's not part of it. You're just going to get down, do what you got to do, and get through it. And you guys, for a couple of young guys, really had that move in your pocket. It takes a while to develop that.
Yeah, we had a lot of practice on a bunch of other adventures together, and we made a good team.
All right, you got anything else you want to tell the world here before I move on and start talking about some tech stuff tonight?
I mean, Martin, just it's a hell of an adventure, man. I know you're put a lot of thought and years into this, and it takes a whole group of people to make this thing fun. But man, what an adventure! And for anyone that's thinking about doing it, do it. But be prepared. I think pre-running day one, I did that with another buddy, and that opened my eyes. Like I was like, that's no easy task right there. I mean, if you can finish day one and that's all you do in the whole season, like you've done something. But thanks, Martin. I mean, I had a blast doing it. I look back on it still to this day, and it was all those challenges that made this thing fun and made it a story worth telling, and it added to the chapters of the story. So I had a really good time, and so thank you.
You're welcome. The pleasure's meeting guys like you. Dylan?
Yeah, I don't have the same ending story, but I'll be back. it's on the to-do list. It hasn't been checked off yet. So hopefully, real
Talk to
soon.
David Hopewell.
Yeah, I've thought about it. It'd be a partner I'd love to do it with, but yeah, you got to be, pick your partners wisely, and they're hard to come by.
That's why I ride it by myself. I'm too much of an asshole to ride with other people, and I know that. At
As
least
are we.
I have the ability to self-evaluate accurately. I was the same way in climbing. I climbed hard for 20, 25 years. There were exactly 3 people that I really enjoyed climbing with. Because when you get the right people, it's fun. It's almost like that person's an extension of you. But those people are few and far between. And it's not that there's anything wrong with most of the rest of the world. It's just really hard to find people that in really tough circumstances you can get along with. You just feel good about sharing the load.
And I think, Dylan, I think we both say, like, it's like you just said, what's neat, Martin, is when you have that partner and you can predict what they're going to do non-verbally, and I think a lot of the times if I could predict what Dylan's move would be in any scenario, and I think you'd share the same sentiment, Dylan. And
yeah,
there's not a better partner. And that's why, I got the idea from someone local here, Martin, and he explained to me what the Tour of Idaho was. And I immediately went to Dylan. I called him up and I said, "Hey, here's what we're doing. I'll see you in August."
Yeah.
And it was, he had,
I had a new bike in about 3 weeks.
10 days on the dirt bike, I'm in.
Thank you guys very much. I'm sorry that I put you off for a week. I had to get out of town with my family last week. I don't get that much of an opportunity to do that during tour season. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you very much for coming on. This has been a great show. There's a lot of people watching this tonight, so you guys are good for ratings too.
Cool.
Thanks
Martin.
again.
Take care, fellas.
Thank you, Martin. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. And let me get through really quick what I want to talk about tonight, sort of technically. First of all, next week, as long as I can work it out, my guest is going to be Jim Spooner. I've talked to him about this a little bit. I know he's really busy this time of year, but we can carve out the time. Jim's going to be my guest next week. I think he has one of the most wonderful Tour of Idaho tales to tell. It's kind of like these guys. You'll be spellbound when you listen to what he did. Jim Spooner did the best job. I'm not even going to go out on a limb. He did the best job I've ever seen of navigating the Tour of Idaho. Every time I talked to him, it was just to affirm a decision that he had already made, which was an entirely correct decision. He knows how to read a map. His knowledge of navigation is so good. It's so impressive that even I'm in awe of it. And I mean, I grew up with paper maps. I grew up making maps. I worked for the Kentucky Geological Survey for a while. So maps are in my blood. This guy had it dialed, and his ability to sort of make really good decisions in stressful situations, it's all just awesome to hear. So if Jim can make it, we're going to have him on next week. For right now, let's talk about some things that are relevant to you all that are in the queue or who are out on the tour right now. I think that Coleman Stove is probably trying to watch this from Smoky Bar Store. I've conjured up some new bonus sections for people this year, and I want to talk about those a little bit tonight. On day one, I still don't recommend you do those bonus sections. Armadillo did one yesterday, and if you all were following that, you saw how that worked out. They spent a long time and a lot of energy, and they got in late last night, and those guys are strong riders. So I still don't know if I'm going to recommend any of that day one stuff. On day two, I'm recommending that everybody do the day two challenge section this year. It's one of my favorite trails. I love the trail. It's going to be cool for a while out in the desert, so putting you out there later in the day is not necessarily an issue. If you watched what John and Craig did yesterday, they made real short work of that CS. It's got one little gnarly section in it, but all of you guys can do it. The mystery routes this year, Coleman Stove yesterday was the first team. Jim Spooner got really close. He made one wrong turn very near the end. But Coleman Stove yesterday absolutely nailed their mystery route. And I gave those guys plus 1 point for being the first team this year that got every single turn down pat. Again, I'm not going to penalize you. I'm not going to dock anybody a point this year. Next year, I may get a little bit more strict. You're going to have to screw it up awfully badly this year to lose a point out in the desert. As long as you are kind of close to it, you get most of it right, that's going to be just fine. But I did reward Coleman Stove with a point for being the first team to just absolutely nail it, because they did that because they put the effort into it. They, a lot of other guys got out there and, they'd spend like 30 seconds at every intersection. They'd say, yeah, we got it. Let's go on. Those guys didn't do that. They sat at every intersection and they made darn sure that they knew what to do next before they did it. Jim did that too, but in one place he got off, and once you get off the route, it's kind of hard to get back on it the way I've got it set up. So on day 3, the first bonus section, I just don't know if it's been sawed. I think it's called Bear Lake Trail or something. It's up there off Pass Creek. I'm going to try to get up there in the next few days and look at that. The issue with that is I'm not going to recommend that anybody do that right now, because it's kind of a one-way trail. And the portion that needs sawing is always along the creek at the bottom, that Bear Creek. And if you get down there and it's not sawed, it's way not sawed, because there's a bunch of avalanches that slide down there every year. So it's not just like a few trees that are going to be down. It's going to be several hundred. And if it hadn't been sawed, it's awful. And on a fully loaded tour bike, I'm not so sure you get back up that hill that you rode down to get down into the creek. You might have to disassemble it and carry it back up part by part. So I'm not recommending that first bonus section on day 3 right now. However, I created a new bonus section towards the end of day 3 for everybody. We used to use this as a bonus section. I took it off because it's a little gnarly, but this year the water's pretty low, so that kind of eliminates some of the gnarliness. But on day 3, at waypoint XYZ 78, there's a route that we force the 3-person teams to take. So this won't be a bonus if you're on a 3-person team. We only have one of those this year, so that's why I don't feel too bad about doing this. And they have to do more stuff that day other than just this. But at waypoint 78 on day 3, if you ride down into Big Peak Creek and then ride out to Big Smoky and then ride that down to Smoky Bar Store, you'll get a point for that. On day 4, all 3 of those bonus sections have been ridden, and they're good to go. Now, that was, every time the wind blows, that can change. But as of right now, the first bonus section, the one that goes from Bowery over to Germania, Jeff Jensen went and checked that out today. He says it's perfectly doable. The second one, which is the out and back up off the Custer Motorway, you're good to go there. And the third one, the one that's like the big U-shaped loop to the south that's down off that ATV trail that goes up Treeler Creek, that's good to go. In the order I would rank them, I would say the last one is the first one I would think about doing. The out and back to the wilderness area off the Custer Motorway is the second one I would think about doing, but only if I were there before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because it doesn't advance you an inch. The first one is the last one I would think about doing, but at least that one advances you. You come out down the road from where you went in. And if you can ride it, it's not that much time. It's really steep. And there's some dead engine switchbacks coming down off the other side. There's some of that Ditch Creek kind of stuff coming down off the backside. So I definitely count on doing a third one. That one's an easy enough one to pick up. It advances you down the trail. It's not that much longer than the gnarly ATV trail that goes up towards the lake anyway. That one I would definitely count on doing. You get on day 5. On day 5, the challenge section is the easiest challenge section of the entire tour. If you're a soloist, you should ride it anyway because you'll get a bonus for doing that. I would also ride, if I were a soloist, the day 2 challenge section because you'll get a bonus for doing that. And they're both easy. And again, this year, the heat in the desert's not that bad, at least not right now. On day 5, the challenge section's easy. So if you need a challenge section, count on doing it. And if you don't, do it for the bonus. And then the ride up to Sheephorn Lookout and back is dead simple. It's Jeep roads. It's really fast. You won't have any trouble with it. Now, as of right now, and I don't think this is going to change, you're good to go on 20, the Salmon Ridge Road, all the way to Williams Summit. We've talked about this. I've made some videos. You got to ride down off Williams Summit to 93, take the slab into Salmon. That's good for you because it gets you there a little bit quicker. Then we're not going to change any of that this year. I don't think the Salmon Ridge Road's going to open, but that Panther Creek and stuff's going to open in a few days. That's like a throughfare there, so they have to open that back up whenever they can. But whenever we make changes to the route, I don't want, we're just going to say this is the way it is now because people have already been riding this stuff. It's really not fair if we keep changing the route unless we absolutely have to. So get off at Williams Summit, ride down into town, and then the next day we're going to avoid Panther Creek and all that kind of stuff. You're going to go up, ride those trails. I got that J route the beginning of day 6. If you have any questions when you're here, I'll go through that with you, do whatever we have to do. Just stay off of 20. All those trails back in there as of right now are legal, but 20 is not, so make sure you stay off that. Once you get later on in day 6, we lost 4 trails on the east side of 93. I replaced it with 4 trails on the west side of 93. Question came up earlier, if I don't ride them all, do I get an off-route penalty? No, you do not. You just won't get the challenge points if you don't roll over them, and you don't get to count the trail. So if you don't ride all 4 of those trails, and again, I don't care what order you do it in, but if you don't ride them all 4, you will not get an off-route penalty, but you just won't get the credit for doing it. Day 7, no issues there. You should be able to get through that just fine. On day 8 and day 9, I made a video a few days ago about what to do. I've got a complete set of directions that I'm sending to teams when I send them the mystery route. This is what you do on day 8 and day 9. Now, what I'm going to do on day 8 and day 9, as it turns out, we can get to Windy Bill and Windy Ridge from the north. You can get to it from the 250. So we're going to go to Weatis Workstations, take a single track that takes us up to the 250. You're going to leave the Lolo at Pete Forks, and I went through this the other day. Everybody's going to do Ant Hill this year. You're going to go to Pete Fork. You're going to go over to Beaver Dam Saddle. You're going to take this incredibly long Jeep road that goes across Lean-To Ridge. You end up at Weatis, which is the official center of nowhere in the universe. Then you're going to ride a very cool single track trail down Weatis Creek out to the 250. I conjured up a couple of challenge points out there. There's a couple of little out and back to lookouts and little small peaks and stuff that are kind of scenic. So we'll replace Castle Butte and the Lundy Ridge challenge point with these short little half-mile out and backs. And that's all of the information that I'll send you. But you can still do Windy Ridge to Windy Bill, or you can do Junction Mountain to Windy Bill. That's outside of the fire areas right now. And so the questions come up a lot. Am I going to get an off-route penalty if I don't do that? Not unless you're on a 3-person team. If you're on a 3-person team, and I'll deal with the 3-person team when they get here, you're going to have to ride either up Windy Bill or Windy Ridge to get to Windy Bill from the north, or you're going to have to ride up Junction Mountain and then go to Scurvy. If you're on a 2-person team or if you're a soloist, that is entirely optional, so you won't lose an off-route penalty. But if you don't do those trails and something closes ahead of you, you won't be able to have enough points to finish. So if you get there early enough in the day and you can ride those trails, I highly recommend that you do it. Because the State Line Complex, we still don't know what's going to happen with that. We've got a way. We're going to just take everybody out to Superior, to St. Regis, then up to Little St. Joe. And then you can get right back on, not State Line Trail, but State Line Road. We're going to have everybody go out across Stevens Peak. And then Jim Spooner and I are working on a way maybe to put a couple little loops. There's some single track out there. I think we could create a couple little loops for people that need some trails at that point because of the stuff lost by fire. Look, we're losing Lundy Ridge. We're losing Heller-Simmons Divide. We're losing State Line Trail. So we got to make those up somehow. And Windy Ridge and Windy Bill are a pretty good way of doing that. You may get there and say, well, yeah, I've got a few bonus sections in my back pocket right now. Why should I do these? Because you don't know what's going to happen ahead. There's still 2 more days. On day 10, the one single track trail that we had that everybody had to do in day 10 is closed. I'm just going to send you around on the pavement. I'm not even going to send you up in the hills there. And you can make that up if you need to by doing Independence Creek. Most people won't need to. Here's the one caveat. For 2- and 3-person teams, if you decline to ride Windy Ridge and Windy Bill, I'm going to insist that you do Independent Creek. You're going to get an off-route penalty if you don't. Now, that sounds like a lot. I'll go through it when I brief you. When every team rolls through, I meet you either at my house or down at College Market. We spread out your maps. I mark them up. I tell you which bonus sections are easy. I give you advice about cutoff times for doing them. I tell you which way to ride some of this stuff. I've told everybody right now, I know exactly the order that I would ride those D6 trails if it were me. And I'll talk to each of you as you come through about that. They're certainly easier to ride. All of them are easier in one direction than the other. And the way I would do it does involve an out and back. You have to do an out and back on Twin Ridge. But it means that you're riding the CDT in the direction that I think is the easiest. It means you're riding down Ditch Creek. And those are all things that I will give you some advice for. You are free to accept or reject that advice. I don't care how you do it. But just bear in mind that you have to be able to cobble together a minimum number of trails. The other thing that somebody asked today, which is a great question, is, well, what about, the whole challenge point system? It kind of went out the window. There's too many fires. So I'm not going to count challenge points anymore. I'm going to count trails. And there are some challenge points that are still there that I'm going to, say, yeah, you got to go out and get this. I put it on there. Like we took all the challenge points on day 6 from the east side of 93. We put them on the west. But, if something closes and all it is a challenge point that's in the middle, like I don't care about the challenge point at Moon Saddle and day 10. Who cares about that? It just happens to be in a scenic spot. I'm not going to make you make up things like that. So don't worry about the points so much as the trails. So if you miss a trail for any reason, you got to make it up somehow. That way, what we do this year is kind of the equivalent to what Stuart did last year in Dillon for, more than half the tour. It's what Jim Spooner did. If you're a soloist and you ride less than Jim did, you're not going to get credit for doing the Tour of Idaho. 2- and 3-person teams have to do a little bit more than what Jim did. Now, I'll get you through all this stuff. There are ways that we can engineer in. There's trails all over the place we could use. But if I tell you, look, today, if it were me, I would do this. Again, that's just advice. I can't ride it for you. So you're free to accept or reject that advice as you see fit. But if you ride past a lot of stuff that I said, look, if you're here by this time, go do this, and you just ride past it, don't argue with me later about, well, I just wasn't feeling it. Listen to what these two guys just told you about what they went through. Next week, wait till you hear what Jim Spooner went through. I was talking to him a lot. I am still blown away by what he accomplished. I put up a picture tonight of a log being sawed, and that's an actual log that I sawed with a silky saw, and I've done a lot of that. Spooner probably sawed 300 logs going across Heller-Simmons Divide last year. The guy was flying. Then all of a sudden, his waypoints got really close together. Washouts, trails that you got to saw that you didn't think you were going to have to saw. All that stuff is part of the tour. I hear guys go, well, I don't want to ride that trail because nobody's been down there and I don't know if it's been sawed. Okay, but if you don't get enough trails farther down the tour, that's it. There's nothing that I can do for you. So this year, pardon me, when there's a lot of uncertainty, I wouldn't ride past anything. If I was there in time and I thought I could get it, I would ride that damn trail. If ride down a ways and see if it's sawed. But don't roll past anything that you think you have the time to do. And that's exactly opposite of the advice I normally give. But this year's, it's not really an unusual year. The last 2 years have been the unusual years where we had a stable tour. This year is kind of going more back to the old days when, things changed a lot. Fires popped up. And as I said on one of the videos I made this week, hell, one year we had a third of the tour closed. The entire middle part of the state was off. We still figured out a way to get around it, and we'll do it for you guys too this year. There's never been a year when we didn't have a tour of Idaho. Well, there was one year we kind of didn't, and that was the year that my middle son was born. But we'll get you through it. But don't ride past things that you can do. You might get away with it, but I just don't know what the future holds. And, you start riding past stuff and you get up in day 9 and day 10, you may get to the point where all of a sudden it dawns on you, there's no way I can make up these points, or even if there is a way, it's really going to suck. So that's the only thing I'm going to tell you. I've had that discussion with a few riders the past few days, and And a couple cases, they didn't want to do things that I said, look, if it were me, I would really do this. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, okay. But I didn't tell you that to be ornery. I told you that because I think that you will not get another opportunity on down the trail. That's the reason that I say to do that. Look, I've been out there just like you guys. And, Jim Spooner, who's the nicest guy in the world, I was telling him, look, Jim, I don't know what's going to happen again. You want to do this? And there were, most of the time he was pretty good about it. He'd go, yeah, I'll give it a try. But there were a couple times towards the end, and I totally get this because I've been there. Man, I don't know if I can do it. But that's way different when you're on day 8, 9, and 10 than it is when you're on day 1, 2, and 3. If you're riding past stuff there, I just don't know what's going to happen later on in the tour. All right. Once again, you've wasted a perfectly good hour and 15 minutes of your life that you could never get back. That's on you, not on me. I just kind of get out here and talk, and I have no idea why the hell you all show up and listen to this stuff. But it is a ton of fun. Best of luck to the teams that are starting out this week. We have several. And I think we got 2 teams starting out on Wednesday, so I'll get all of their information up tomorrow night. Brent Asper, you are exactly right. Brent Asper, I need to get a hold of you sometime soon. We got some stuff to talk about. Anyway, that's it. So far this year, it's been an exceptional year. It's a lot of fun to watch. Of all the teams that are out there right now, I tell you what, watch these Coleman Stove guys. Last year when they showed up, they were carrying way too much stuff, and they didn't really have the nav dialed the way they should have. You talk about some guys that took their lesson from last year to heart. Those guys showed up this year. Both of them look like they could play a game of badminton with me. I mean, these dudes are stacked. They are absolutely ripped. They're great physical condition. And they showed up with some of the leanest rigs I've ever seen. Jim Spooner, Coleman Stove, and a guy named Bruce Baker a few years ago are the only guys that carry as little gear as I do. I was amazed at how little stuff they had. And if you watched what they did the last few days, they are crushing it out there. They are on their marks. Their navigation is dialed. They know everything that they're doing. They've picked up some really smart bonus sections, and it's going to take, I think, an act of God to slow those guys down. I hate to jinx them or anything, but those guys are looking like strong contenders this year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the next few days. Thanks a lot, everybody. I really appreciate you spending your time on Monday night with me, and next week, if we can work it out, Jim Spooner. Be seeing you.